They're going to disappear, but not before whispering your name in a prayer. They're going to drown in the silence you left behind. They're going to descend into every memory they buried with you. They're going to die in pieces, each one shaped like your forgiveness. They're going to delete everything, except the message you never replied to. They're going to deny it, but you are the one they revisit nightly. They're going to detach, but you'll still live in their sacred spaces. They're going to deflect, but every song still brings you back. They're going to desire you too late. They're going to drive away, but your echo rides with them. They're going to divide their life into before you and after you. They're going to drift, but your love is the compass. They're going to disguise their grief as peace. They're going to distract themselves with strangers who can't reach your depth. They're going to distort the truth because it still bleeds. They're going to dig into memories that once felt harmless. They're going to drown in the love they didn't water. They're going to delay healing just to feel you again. They're going to defend their choices until your silence wins. They're going to dance with ghosts of who they were with you. They're going to deny how holy your absence feels. They're going to destroy everything that reminded them of your light. They're going to downplay it, but your name shakes their spirit. They're going to demand closure, but nothing answers like your stillness. They're going to descend into regret the moment you rise. They're going to doubt the mirror that still reflects your touch. They're going to dodge truth, but truth never stops chasing. They're going to decay from within where your love once lived. They're going to disguise longing as anger. They're going to detest the new you because it doesn't beg. They're going to detour through karmic roads that lead back to your name. They're going to dim every light that once reminded them of you. They're going to desire healing, but not if it means forgetting you. They're going to disconnect, but divine timing remembers. They're going to delay apology until your love is no longer available. They're going to divide their soul just to numb your memory. They're going to deny destiny, but it still calls you. They're going to decorate their emptiness with illusions. They're going to delete the photos, but not the ache. They're going to die in dreams where you still love them. They're going to dissolve in silence you mastered. They're going to distract their soul, but God keeps showing your face. They're going to deafen themselves to intuition, but your name stays loud. They're going to disappear from others, but always show up in your prayers. They're going to destroy connections just to feel something like you. They're going to defend their actions, but guilt has a heartbeat. They're going to dig through the past, but can't bury divine love. They're going to draw back, but your presence is permanent. They're going to decide too late that you were holy. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. They're going to delay joy to punish themselves. They're going to drag your name into every failed connection. They're going to detest others for not being you. They're going to destroy what could have healed you both. They're going to desire you most when they can't reach you. They're going to dance around the truth, but it always ends in your name. They're going to defend their choices, but not their peace. They're going to delete memories, but your energy survives. They're going to drown in conversations never had. They're going to define love by what they lost. They're going to dismiss signs until they break. They're going to distort your kindness as weakness until it saves them. They're going to descend the same ladder you once climbed for them. They're going to deplete every source trying to replace your spirit. They're going to dodge your memory, but it lives in their shadow. They're going to dig into your smile and find repentance. They're going to deny the pull, but gravity remembers you. They're going to dip into darkness just to feel your light. They're going to disappear into distractions, but return to your absence. They're going to delay surrender, but fate waits for no one. They're going to die to their pride before love resurrects them. They're going to dissolve in their own denial. They're going to define regret by your name. They're going to drift until they realize you were the anchor. They're going to derail every path that doesn't lead back to you. They're going to dismiss you until the divine reminds them. They're going to deepen their silence, but your voice still haunts. They're going to deceive themselves, but not their soul. They're going to detour, but return sacred and shattered. They're going to deny what they once begged God for. They're going to desert others looking for your spirit. They're going to dilute their joy with your absence. They're going to disguise emptiness as peace. They're going to digest guilt with every heartbeat. They're going to drop to their knees in your name. They're going to dwell in regret like a second home. They're going to demolish illusions, but still see you standing there. They're going to drift into numbness, but you still feel holy. They're going to dissolve in tears they hid from the world. They're going to deny your impact, but heaven doesn't lie. They're going to deliver false closure, but it won't heal. They're going to discard others who don't hurt like you did. They're going to diminish themselves, chasing your shadow. They're going to define themselves by who they lost. They're going to direct blame, but carry your name. They're going to demand forgiveness, but never from themselves. They're going to deal with angels who still whisper your name. They're going to destroy the mask you once kissed. They're going to drink from broken wells hoping for your spirit. They're going to dream of you until they wake healed. They're going to defy fate, but it already branded your name into their bones. They're going to disown every version of themselves that wasn't loved by you. They're going to detest silence, but that's where you still speak. They're going to delete numbers, not memories. They're going to dodge the divine until it answers in. If this touched your soul, don't scroll. Comment your favorite quote and subscribe for more. Someone out there is still loving you in silence.